Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto, and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, with this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now we are joined by, get this video out of the way, Adam Meakin, Brian's Logic, Arwin, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, and I don't think there's anybody in Element, but we're in there if anybody is. No, we're not. So Discord, that's it. Welcome one and all.
Good morning.
Hello, how are things?
Very well.
Hello.
Very well. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge? That's a horizon, formerly known as Earth curvature.
Still? Well, they claim boats are going over the horizon, still till this day.
We debunked that in 2020. If the horizon's refracted, as they told us, after demonstrating that it cannot be a physical geometric leading edge for boats to go over, therefore response from globe believer refracted, it cannot be geometric. And the claim of a globe is a geometric claim with a geometric requirement for a geometric tangent to that Earth curve edge. They used to say boats fell over. Now boats fall over refraction rather than Earth curve, debunking the claim of Earth curve. We don't have an Earth curve edge for a horizon. We've only got one. It's not Earth curve.
People listening out there who might be new, because there's always someone new listening eventually. The actual claim of a physical geometric horizon that boats go over is actually only a mathematical claim. It's not actually something real. The physical sphere edge, the geometric sphere edge that Nathan is asking for the evidence for, is only in the maths. It's not in reality.
Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
You're gonna need all for that, right?
Any evidence of the R value? Earth radius. If you're going to ask for R for Earth radius, yeah, you need that for axial rotation, Neil. Spot on. R value? Anybody at all? I've already covered it.
How are you going to have an R value if Earth is not a sphere?
You can't. We debunked it in 2020. If you haven't got a geometric sphere edge to measure a tangent to, you can't assert the sphere edge tangent-based geometry of an Earth curve-based sphere Earth. So, no, you're right, Neil. Right, any evidence of the distance to the sun?
I just want to go back to the R value question there a second. According to Phil Bell, the evidence for the R value is GPS, a flat Earth system, spherical excess, and some other absolute rubbish. That's the evidence for the R value from Professor Phil Bell. That's the best he's got.
Well, that's not evidence, my friend.
No, that's wrong. Actually, GPS is flat Earth, and spherical excess is mathematical only. Nobody measures any of this rubbish. Sorry, Nathan. Evidence for the distance to the sun.
The distance to the sun, indeed.
Well,
so
there is an angular size. Go on, sorry. Go on.
Before we move on really quick, that means GPS would be proof of an FE then, right?
It is. It's using a grid system that's flat. It's based on the positions to the stars measured with angles off a flat plane. It's a latitude-longitude grid system. I was going to say Euclidean, but it's Cartesian. I always get those two mixed up. It's a Cartesian grid. It can't be anything other than flat.
Okay.
So yes, to just confirm, it is indeed a flat Earth proof when people say GPS. That's why it needs the overt strapline global positioning system. Okay, Well, beyond the title, how does it work? Well, it works with a grid that's been measured off a flat plane with angles that can only be measured off a flat plane with a system that's flat. So yeah, it's definitely a flat earth proof is GPS. Shocking, isn't it? Any evidence you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
You went past the distance to the sun, Nathan.
I thought we wrapped that up in the R value. You'll need R for that also. Based on the globe's assertion of the distance, 93, whatever it is, million miles.
Well, I can give the story about what they did if you want, or we can just move on. I don't mind.
Yeah, you go ahead, Brian. You seem keen.
Well, I thought you want a bit more meat on the bones on the show. Well, to figure out the distance to the sun, they pre-assumed it was a globe of radius 3959 miles, something they never measured. And they pre-assumed that Venus was also a sphere of basically 3959 mile radius. And they, during the transit of the sun, the Venus's transit of the sun, they determined off of the angular size of the sun and the angular size of Venus how far away from the sun Venus was. And that told them how far away from Venus the Earth was, their globe Earth, and then essentially how far away from the sun the globe Earth was. That's basically where it all comes from. It's all back engineered from one point, and that is them looking up and taking an angular size of an object in the sky that they've never seen the actual size of.
Any more for any more? Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Well, what are you talking about? Because the guy came in Flat Swords the other night, and he was talking about mass attracting mass. I don't even think he knew about pseudo-ammonia force space.
Mass attracting mass. What? Wait, checking my calendar. What year is it again? What's going on?
Yeah. Hey, talking about.
It's been 108
He
years.
Guys.
Mass hasn't been claimed to attract mass for 108 years.
Wait, so if mass was attracting mass at some point, would it have just stopped?
No.
Is that how that works?
It never was. They called it a law of nature, right? In that regard, it's claimed to be a law, or it was 108 years ago. But laws of nature are irrefutable. Right? You can't violate them. They're always in effect. But in the case of mass attracting mass, it was never in effect. It doesn't happen.
Well, then why do I still hear law of gravity? I heard that the other day. There's a law of gravity.
Did you not watch one of my worst viewed series in terms of live shows, at least? The Wired Witch series. We did 5 videos on the Wired Witch, and that series is a progression of how we became indoctrinated into the ideas of gravity, progressing all the way through to you being the proud benefactor of the information at the end of the process that lets you know that it's all very interesting and mathematically beautiful, but we really don't know if it's even applicable. That's what you get to learn at the end of the process. Along the way, you get told mass is attracting mass when you're really young by people who know damn well it isn't.
That's sad.
Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
Look
Well,
at
how
stuff
would you
and
put
then
it through
make
the
up
scientific method?
stories.
Go ahead, Duncan.
No, yeah, I was just saying, look at stuff in the sky and then make up stories about it. I think that's science now, right?
Well, that's astronomy, astro naming.
How would you put it through the scientific method if
Not science.
if you can't handle it?
It isn't science. It's hijacking the valor of an empirical method known as science to infer that the stories about the lights in the sky, after looking at them, have some empirical validity to them when they don't. So you'll hear words like experiment and theory when they have none of the above.
Speaking of empirical, what are those 4 points again? Because I was looking all over for it and I couldn't find it anywhere.
Observable, testable, repeatable, falsifiable.
Yeah, I couldn't find it. It doesn't say that anywhere.
Okay. Yeah, I said that to QE once when he was teaching me this stuff. I'm like, I'm trying to find these references for basic stuff, cause and effect reasoning, systematic method, hypothesis, just a string of words that says that from a professor or something, and I can't find it. And he laughed, QE, quantum eraser. And his reasoning behind laughing was because it's very rudimentary stuff, basic. So to expect to find some university prof talking about the basics of science when you're reaching a university level is highly improbable, because it's like, I don't know, a neurosurgeon describing the shape of someone's face, so rudimentary and basic, or describing someone having a nose. It's basic. So you don't tend to find that there's people who are describing cause and effect reasoning based on systematic experimentation after formulating a hypothesis, after watching something happen in nature. It's just not summarized in that way. We are dumbing this down, surprisingly, because the average general Joe public member doesn't have the slightest idea what science is, and has led to the misapprehension that stories about lights in the skies and black holes and things of that nature are science, and they're not. But they wouldn't know, and a university professor's not going to tell them.
But there's university professors that teach things that aren't science as science.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they don't know what science is either.
Yeah, strictly speaking.
Science is a method, correct?
Yeah, a method to elucidate the cause of an effect you've observed in nature.
And when you do that, right, that's when you come up with those 4 points.
When you say to have something that could be deemed empirical, I think that's how this question came up when you last asked it on Ballbusters. What is it to be empirical? Yeah, observable, testable, repeatable, falsifiable was the list that Quantum Eraser gave you. If you look up empirical, I think it says to test by experiment. What's an experiment? A hypothesis test. What's a hypothesis? The establishment of your presumed cause of an effect observed in nature. What's an effect observed in nature? A phenomena that you're studying. That's the starting point. Why did that happen? Let's find out. How do we find out? We presume something caused it, and then we vary it to see if it did or not. That's it. That's all the method is.
So that's when you get those 4 points. I got it. Because then it would be observable, testable, repeatable, and falsifiable, correct?
Yeah,
I got that right?
Well, yeah, if you say mass attracting mass, that's a statement. Is that you observing mass attracting mass in nature? No, it isn't. So can you put it through the scientific method? No. What about four-dimensional space-time bending? Is that observable? No. Definitely not going to be put through the scientific method then. What about scurvy? Is that observable? Yep. Right, let's move on to the next step then. What do we do if we want to figure out the cause of that effect? We suppose the cause of it, and then vary the cause of it, and see if we get the effect. That's it. If you do, you've established the cause of the effect. That's it. That's all you've got to do. And how do you establish the cause of the effect? Vary your presumed cause and see if it causes the effect. That's called an experiment. Variation of presumed cause to see if it causes the effect you're studying in nature. That's it. That's the whole process from start to end. You see something. Now, where the repeatable aspect comes in is the not repeatability of the observation of the phenomena, but the repeatability of the variation of the presumed cause to induce the outcome, the effect you're studying in nature. Now, that bit has to be repeatable. That would be to say that systematic experimentation based on a hypothesis has to be systematically performed by multiple parties, unconnected. Now, that isn't done for anything other than to eliminate the possibility of an experimental setup flaw. Well, if you have a flaw in your experimental setup, then it'll be exposed by the repeatability of people doing your test. If there's a problem with the hypothesis, it shouldn't get to the testing stage. If you've got a non-viable hypothesis. So hence us asking any viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology or astrophysics, because they don't have any science. However, the Western world is led to believe that all of this crap about being on a globe is fed to them by the science of the globe. Well, there isn't any. Any evidence
Well,
for
that's
such?
funny
just ask a
because we
question,
used to be
Nathan, sorry.
told all the time.
Oh, three people
So-
at once.
When we're
Sure.
describing the scientific method, I've been terming it observe a natural phenomena. Could it be termed observe a phenomena? Because there's obviously a difference between a phenomena and a natural phenomena. Has it got to be something that occurs in nature for it to go to the scientific method? Or can it just
Absolutely.
be a phenomena?
Yeah, we're talking about natural science. Plus, if you have something that's not a natural phenomena, something that's induced in a machine, let's say you, I don't know, fire some light at a mirror and measure the return signal, and then you start spinning a dolly that's got the light bouncing off the mirror so that it's rotating as you fire that light. Okay. Have you induced an effect? Yeah, you have. What was the cause of the effect? Well, is it observed in nature?
Man,
Or did a man make it happen? A man made it happen. So we already know the cause of that effect, don't we? I caused it. I made it happen. I made that happen when I induced that effect. Now, stumbling across something occurring in nature and asking why that happened is very different to making something happen and then going, why did that happen? If you don't know why it happened when you made it happen, then you're an idiot. You don't need science if you're making things happen and asking why they're happening.
that's the part they don't understand, Nathan, because they keep playing with these toys that they have and claiming that it's science.
Oh, I see. They make a toy and then call it an experiment. Yeah, ask about face starting with the experiment. Yeah, the experiment comes at the end.
Well, even if you grant them that you can see a phenomenon within the device, so it's not natural, right? You're still not manipulating anything. You could call it an effect, but you don't have the cause.
Yeah, you do. The cause is man, right?
Well, you're the cause of the apparatus, but the effect you observe within the apparatus, you're not the cause of that.
Yeah, you are. Unless you can show me it occurring in nature.
No, the device would be the cause.
Yeah, you
I
made the
mean, if you wanna look
device.
at it that
But
way.
you made the device to make the effect happen, and then you turned it on. What are you going to say? Well, because I've made this machine, and then I've switched it on, and it's autonomous from that point forward. The machine's making no, not at all.
Well,
No, it's
well,
not.
under that reasoning, you could call every effect you see in nature. You could say the cause is God. Move on.
No, because I can vary and manipulate presumed causes of it to see if I can induce it when it's not happening. You know what I mean?
Right, but you can manipulate aspects of the device to control it, the effect you observe within the device.
Yeah, but you're still creating the device to create the effect to then question why the effect's happening. This isn't going to change, no matter how many
they
steps you
got
put in between.
They got natural devices. Where you from?
No, I didn't say
Can I
that.
ask a question?
No, I didn't introduce the idea of nature to this. I was just saying if you're just talking about an effect, I don't like
Oh, I see where he's going. Oh, right. If you're not interested in the elucidation of the cause of a natural phenomena, you're just interested in Is it in inducing? Yeah, in inducing the effect yourself. So the question of its origin, its cause, is a kind of irrelevant question. You're just trying to induce the effect then.
well, to manipulate the effect is to know the cause. Like, if I make a coffee maker and there's processes that take place within that machine, I'm not necessarily the cause of those processes that happen. I'm
They
just,
don't need to.
Huh?
They don't. No, you have to backwards. They don't need to look for cause because the cause is you make.
You're roboting, Brian. I'll do a quick shout out. Hopefully, Brian will drop and rejoin. Quick shout. Why is my stuff all not lined up properly today? I have lined this all up once. Weird. Okay, shout out to Godzilla37 who says, we, in quotes, know this, and we, in quotes, studied that. Their we, in quotes, is no more valuable than the one I left on... Godzilla, come on. Is no more valuable than the one I left in the toilet. Thank you for the super chat.
Good one.
Well, what I'm talking about is like problem solving within technology. That is not science. It's, technological problem solving. That's all that is.
troubleshooting.
Yeah, troubleshooting. Trial and error.
So you're talking about like if you made a coffee maker that did something other than make coffee, like the way it was designed, if you could troubleshoot that, that's what you're talking about? Because if you make a coffee maker and it just makes coffee, it's just doing what you designed it to do, right?
Well, we're confusing things, right? Because we're saying the coffee maker, which is like a hard noun. I'm just talking about effects within the device.
Let's pick something that's got let's give you an example that parallels with nature. If you take something like the Wright brothers and flight, yeah, then you can easily parallel it with something that has an observed effect in nature. You can see something happening flight, right? You can class that as a phenomena, and you can easily science the cause of the phenomena. However, going through the process of trial and error to get men into the air is not science. That's technology.
Thank you. That's the major point I wanted to make. So you can apply cause and effect reasoning within technology, but that does not make it science. Just so people understand that, because I think a lot of people don't.
Make it not either.
It doesn't make it not either. No, absolutely. I was about to go there exactly. Your timing's epic, Adam, but you've left me stuttering because I was about to go there too. Go ahead.
Well, even in the coffee machine, we can take certain points within that machine and elucidate a cause and effect relationship. Yeah. The actual device, when it's put together, isn't science, but within certain parts of it, certain the knowledge of how we're going to construct the machine may have been elucidated from a cause and effect relationship. So we know that, for example, we want hot water, we want boiling water. So we can take the science from that, can't we? We know we're going to have to put heat into this device to get the water hot. There is science in it. We're going to use that foundation of science as the knowledge for how we're going to build the machine. We're not going to put no hot water heater in and expect it to make hot coffee.
So Godzilla says, don't blame me, it was written perfectly, sit closer. Now, you put quotes around everything. I'll read it if you like, with the intonation instead of the quote marks around it. We know this, and we studied that. Their we is no more valuable than the one I left in the toilet. It's not that I can't read. I just read the quotation marks for the people who are listening. And they can't see me doing the air quotes when I'm not even on camera. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate the support.
Why don't you read it to yourself first and then read it out?
I was getting ready to get to that, Adam, is most of the things we build with technology have come from an understanding in science or physics. But that doesn't make everything that we do in technology science. I'm not saying that it's not built on ideas of science, but just not everything. Like when you study eddy currents, there's nothing scientific about that.
It's
Building the
usually
coffee machine.
Let me just try, Adam. It's usually the other way around, right? So it's not that the technology can be described as science when it isn't, because it isn't. But there's a good chance, like with computers, that the science will lead to the technological trial and error that gives us things that are useful. So the applied technology comes from the science in many instances. And there's often, like I was going to go on with the Wright brothers, examples where you can say, no, to understand how to get into the air, they are actually applying cause and effect reasoning. So therefore, you can categorize some of the things they must have done to establish how that effect is achieved. In other words, know how to cause it. That's why I use them as an example. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've gone through the strictest of methodology and gone, oh, I wonder how that bird's flying. Yeah, they may have asked themselves that question, but they haven't then gone forth and said, I will vary this independent variable. They've done it through trial and error. But ultimately, they've still, even in a vague, more wishy-washy way, gone through the very steps that we describe through trial and error. So you can say, no, they had established the cause of the effect. And once they established it, there was no going back. There was no, oh, well, we're not going to understand the Bernoulli effect, I think is what it's called. Right, well, understanding the cause of that effect is what got people in the air. So can you call that science? Yeah. Was there the strictest adherence to the method? No. But could somebody then package it up to adhere to the method? Definitely. I think that's where Adam's going. Adam, do you want to take over from next?
I'll stick with airplanes and Bernoulli. Yeah. So you could take that knowledge about pressure differentials and how as air passes over, the flow will create that differential, which creates uplift. So you've got that knowledge, that cause and effect. You can then take that to a wind tunnel, can't you? And have all the different technological designs that aren't based on science. You've got the science knowledge that you want to create uplift. Yeah. And now you're going to use technology to see what's the most efficient way of doing that. You're not science in the wing per se. You've taken that knowledge. A lot of it's going to be like, say, trial and error. That's why we have a wind tunnel. How will it work in reality?
Well, you could, as part of it, you could travel in a car, put your hand out the window, and slightly turn the front of your hand, the thumb side, slightly turn that up the way, and observe your hand going up, and then slightly turn it down the way and observe your
That's
hand being
lovely.
pushed back down.
The Irish are so easily entertained. Quick shout out to us so far. Hello, love the show. Someone mentioned that the globe head's measurement to Venus had something to do with Easter. Could you elaborate on that connection? I certainly can. So Dr. John Dee sent me a book called The Sun in the Church that explained how the church basically, through Kepler's assumptions of orbital motions and the elliptical orbital motions that were assumed, were done because they couldn't, or they were incorrectly tracking when Easter would be, because they didn't have accurate predictions for the luminary alignment. So in order to better figure out when that would occur, Kepler was employed, and his use of his interplanetary motion system was what gave him the scale. Now, where Venus comes in is Huygens, which is considerably more recent, I believe. But the assumption to nail down the value to the sun in the current heliocentric model is based on those scale values that we used to predict when those lights would be in those patterns, so that the church would know when Easter was going to be, so that they could say, after this next full moon, that next weekend, the Sunday will be Easter. But not getting it right meant they couldn't say to the people, this is when Easter will be, and it's entirely based on the patterns of the lights in the sky. So that's where Kepler comes in. But Venus comes in with the application of Earth's radius to Venus, because with that scale developed by Kepler, you can better or more accurately determine when the alignments will be, but it doesn't tell you anything about distance. So you have to make an assumption in terms of something, either the actual size of one of the items that you're measuring, or the distance between yourself and it. In other words, in terms of the way you'd get a triangulatable value, you've got to know one of them before you start making the measurements. Well, if you don't know one of them, the next best thing for a heliocentrist is just assume Venus is the same R-value as Earth. And
Yeah, but then that's not science.
Well, no, it's an assumption by Huygens. But I'm just answering so far's super chat question. A big shout out to John D, because the majority of that story I had bits and pieces of, but it was only when he sent me that book, and he didn't even leave me with why he was sending it me. He just sent it to me. But then you read it and go, oh, why? This is the condensed, concise versions of what we talk about on the show on a regular basis. Because his lead-in, I think, was that you might know all of this stuff already. Now, the answer was no, I didn't know all of it already, far from it. But the general gist of what it was getting at and driving at, yes, I'd got a vague idea about most of it, but I hadn't sort of put it in the connections that the book had just laid it out. So that's the book that John D sent me, which was The Sun in the Church. There you go. Thank you for the super chatters so far.
That's the Western view, because we switch calendars as well.
I was going to ask that.
The Jews don't have this problem. They run a moon-based calendar, which means it does Passover moves every year. So if you base it around that, it will move and does move. So with respect to the Orthodox Church, they have a different Easter to us because of this. Because what we've done is force it into this. Well, first of all, the Julian calendar and then the Gregorian shift, which is why it was difficult, because all these are based on the sun, which is a yearly cycle, but you need 13 to keep the sun and the moon. I think it's 13, Brian will probably correct me. Sun and the moon aligned, which is why for others it moves, but we try to fix it based on the sun, you see, which is why they were trying to use those stars to give it a date in the solar year, as opposed to it just having its date in the lunar solar cycles. Done.
So yeah, I mean, the legitimacy of this predicting, or this prediction-based system developed by Kepler, from what I read, it wasn't in any way designed to be reified. It was using maths to predict when the lights would be lining up the way they thought they would be. Now, it doesn't alter what the heliocentric system, in this case Kepler's development thereof with elliptical motion for Easter, is. It wasn't necessarily suggested at any point to me in the book that I can remember that they were intentionally attempting to reify this into the world we were standing on. It was being described that way, but it wasn't necessarily even inferred that that was a suggestion of what we were standing on. Like I say, it was just to predict when Easter would come. Now, you fast forward to now, and we're standing on a reified version of that model, you know, that was enhanced with elliptical motion by Kepler at that point. But maybe I could throw this out to the panel. Would you infer in any way that the reification upon development of something like this, so picture you as Kepler developing this and coming up with a way that they might move to better understand how they'll line up in the future, would that mean, just by virtue of him inventing it, that he automatically assumes it to be the case, and therefore Kepler is, in his mind's eye, standing on a sphere? What do you guys think?
Well, Kepler might have already pre-assumed he was on a sphere, because I don't know if Brahe and people that came before Kepler and Copernicus, if they were presuming the Earth was a sphere. I don't know that. It's just kind of claimed they were. Kepler got all the information concerning the sun's path throughout the year from astrology. That's where he originally got it, because he was an astrologer. And that's where that information was originally catalogued, because astrology came before astronomy. Astronomy was taught to people like Kepler after they learned astrology or through astrology. But the point is, the point I'm making is that where Newton's claims of a force of gravity come from, or well, not his claims, but what he's postulated, originated with ideas from Kepler. Kepler was his inspiration. Well, Kepler talked about the movements and what's causing them to move. Now, I don't know, obviously with Kepler, it had to involve us moving around the sun as well, because it was the Copernican model that he amalgamated with the original, what would have been the original solar analemma, which would be observations of what the sun is doing in the sky above us, where the sun is going and the sun is moving to at different times of the year. So he would have pre-assumed that we were moving and on a globe to do that. That's the only way he would have been able to.
I get that, and that was very well put and detailed. But I'm saying, for you to fundamentally alter how a model works. Now, when I see Wakey's interview with that astrophysicist, that lady, and she quite crass in the way she says, we'll just change the model if there's a fault with it. Now, for her, I appreciate, no, she does actually think that that model does represent the sphere that she's standing on. That I can get. But when it comes to Kepler, when you're starting with fundamental ideas that are relatively new, and you're making alterations to them to better make predictions with, that doesn't... I know you're saying, no, I'm going to have to make us move around the sun for this to be making logical sense. Does that mean he actually thinks that's the case, though? Or is it just a way of looking at things to make a better prediction? We'll never know. We're only ever going to postulate, but I don't know. It's just... As a flat earther, I now find it a stretch, even when I look back on the history of these people, to say, so does that really mean he conjured a ground below his feet that was spherical at that point when he started making these assertions? Copernicus or Kepler or any of them?
Historically, Brahe and Kepler clashed on the claim that the Earth, as a globe or whatever, was moving around the sun, that the sun was at the center, because Brahe was a geocentrist. So that's one of their biggest clashes, the fact that one was a geocentrist according to history, and one had this new Copernican model. Now, who was Copernicus? That's really the thing, you know. I don't know. It's hard to believe that somebody would kind of look at the sun moving around and then start trying to claim that we were moving around it.
Exactly.
It makes no logical sense.
Exactly. Hold on. I just want to stay with Brian for a minute because he's on the same tip as me. Right, exactly. So as a flat earther, you look back and try and empathise, conceptualise, put yourself in their position, however you want to phrase it. And it's just stretch for me to actually take the step of reification for them when they're making fundamental changes to the model and perhaps arguing, as you're describing, the difference between us fundamentally fixed in place and us physically hurtling around the sun. Now, when you're arguing about things that are so, fundamentally opposed to each other, now, I get that they are just describing mathematical models, and they would obviously have understood that while they developed the maths for it. And the two opposing models doesn't necessarily mean as they use them to describe how the sun or lights in the sky are going to line up, doesn't necessarily, or it's a stretch for me to say, well, that automatically means that when he said that, oh no, where everyone understood that we were currently motionless, now we're going thousands of miles an hour. And I actually physically do mean that we are moving, the ground is now moving 1,000 miles an hour for me to put this model forth to better make a prediction of when Easter will be, for instance. I think that's a stretch.
Are we talking about the globe or just its movement? Because didn't they consider the sphere to be the shape of the gods or something like that?
Well, no. They thought it was based on measure.
Go on, John.
They thought it was based on measurement. They thought they were measuring it as a sphere. That's like every citation you find what talks about the dip correction is for a sphere. Even in the celestial navigation books, they'll have that model that's misinterpreted. So
I realise that. And every reference I give to Kepler or Copernicus will directly reference them talking about Earth physically being a sphere. So people are probably listening going, what, is he gone mad? How can he even infer that they wouldn't be suggesting that when that is directly what they're saying? And it's because after a few years of being a flat earther, even conceptually reifying this from its origins, it's so difficult. So to have the empathy to go, oh yeah, he fundamentally made us physically move, the ground physically move where it was once stationary in all models. You go, so what, he literally started making the ground hurtle around the sun? It just doesn't compute in my mind anymore. It's such a difficult thing to wrap my head around. I know he's literally saying it, by the way. I'm not stupid.
Right, but the thing is you're using your present knowledge and understanding and trying to use that to think how he thought. I don't think it's possible.
I know.
We can't know.
Yeah, but after the shit that happened with Newton, with him saying, don't ascribe this nonsensical gravity to me, and look what happened. They ascribed it to him. I'm more along the lines of, I don't know, like, obviously I can't divine these guys' thoughts, but I don't know if he established to himself that he was on a sphere. Maybe he just said maybe it could go either way. It's just a good idea. And then the people that come after these people will use that to further their narrative, right? Because that's what they did with Newton.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
look at Einstein.
Yes.
Einstein said, "Oh, there's no optical experiment, whatever that is, that you can do to tell if it's the sun moving or if it's us moving." But they'll still tell you, "Oh, well, he thought that it was us moving around the sun." Right? So I'm with that. It could go either way. I think it's just the people that want to use the narrative of these guys that the shoulders of the giants that they stand upon to use to further their narrative. Maybe that's just my opinion, but I don't know.
Can I just follow
think
on
you're
with
right.
that?
I think
I
you're
want to
right,
go
Doc.
full conspiratard mode.
You can, I think,
do
D-Rose, you can just after D-Rose. Go ahead, D-Rose.
No, I think you're right, Chocolate, because I think I said that one time before. I said, because especially when y'all started exposing the Newtonian actual philosophy of his own conjecture and how they bastardized it and they butchered it and they made it just convenient for their own heresy. I think they did the same thing in this manner because it might have been an idea. It might have been one of those what ifs. And they took it from the 20th century and they bastardized it because these men are not allowed to attest for their own statements. And these heliocentric proponents are now using their thing, actually lying and putting words, embellishing basically what these guys are really trying to say, because they weren't making any claims of a sphere, more than likely. They were just giving you different ideas of maybe this is how it is, and maybe this
Well,
is
I don't
how
know
it is.
about that.
Well, I agree with you entirely. I mean, it was Eli you were talking to, but if you can get those two together, eventually you'll figure it out eventually
God
one day.
damn
D-Rose.
it!
Who wasn't the chocolate the my name?
I know you didn't just call me Eli.
I did intentionally, yes, just for a joke. Anyway, Adam, go ahead.
I think we've just been pondering the minds of these men. What men? We've got books, yeah. I would just point out this is a way of creating the paradigm shift. Heroes just mentioned their heresy. Yeah, it was their heresy, yet they're funded by the church. This, to me, is just a literary setup for a future paradigm. I don't necessarily think these people have to have even existed. A bit like Aristophanes, Tesla. All of these people help paradigm shifts. Do they actually exist in the format we're giving them? No. Do they need to? No. What's their purpose? It's to further a paradigm shift. And the contradictory nature of their funding and ability to survive even during rather puritanical times where heresy was delivered with death. Yet then the church then accept and adopt these philosophies as we move forward into the new paradigm, which we then have come the 17th century. So I would just consider that rather than trying to consider the mind of a man, maybe consider whether that man even existed. Was he even necessary?
Right. So
Why
it's
does it sound
probably
like you guys
propaganda. It's propaganda
Owen.
story to cover for the shift of policy, basically.
Well, I was going to go to the 1984 quote, but I can't quite remember it correctly. It's something along the lines of, "He who controls the past controls the present, and he who controls the present controls the future." Something along those lines.
You guys are trying to
Yeah,
let
we
these
were
guys.
always
Why
at
are you
war with
letting them off
East
the hook?
Asia.
Sounds like you
Mhm.
want them off the hook.
He who
No,
controls
it's not what happened.
Go on, John.
Well, let me throw something out.
Hold
there.
on, Neil. Hold on, Brian. Go ahead, John.
I think it goes, he who controls the past controls the present. He who controls the present controls the future.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. Go ahead, Brian.
You're just trying to let
Did y'all
these
ever
guys
hear-
off the hook.
It's not that.
you-
Did you not listen to Adam? It's not that we're trying to let Newton or Brahe or any of these people off the hook, so to speak, right? Adam's point, very well made, by the way, Adam, was that these people may not have even existed. It's not relevant. The point is that how these people are being discussed, back to Chocolate's point, It may even be the case that you can find personal documents from individuals who are held up as poster childs for gravity or the globe or heliocentrism in general, and they oppose it for the very thing that they're being praised for. So in that respect, you can say, look, this person was opposed to this mass attracting mass nonsense, but yet it's given his name. It's called Newtonian gravity. Now, maybe that's just some psychopath having a laugh. Oh, you object to it, do you? I'll give it your name then. See how you like that. Maybe. It's not relevant. The point is, the stories that we are told about how these people came to these conclusions, in this case, great super chat, by the way, whoever it was, I've forgotten your name, I'll shout you out again, I'm going to scroll back up. So, us so far, great super chat, right? It shows people how the stories, we could parallel it with a different story so it's not so close to the bone, and say, if for the sake of argument we were all being encouraged to be extremely charitable and condescending of people with a lot of money, it might be that Robin Hood becomes a character in the history narrative in a very different way in order to control the public. Now, that's all we're talking about when we talk about heliocentrism. It's just a control method. Let's not dress it up more than what it is. Yeah, they spend billions of money. I'm going to recommend one of Russian Vid's recent videos. I think it was in response to Creaky Blinder. But it just happened to be, I think when people respond to others in videography terms on YouTube, they just get so much more concise. You know, they focus in on one particular aspect. And that was Russian Vid's in his most recent video. It was excellent. Go and check out Russian Vid's most recent response to Creaky Blinder, where he's talking about how the systems of government and so on spend huge chunks of money just to manipulate the mind of the public, to control you. Now, people don't necessarily draw the parallel between that and things like the church with Easter and heliocentrism and space. They don't necessarily appreciate that, yeah, that is where the mind control money's going. But it doesn't just extend to the current narrative with SpaceX and NASA. It goes back in time. Does it matter that the characters that we're told about today with the books appreciated that they were just coming up with models, if they even existed? No. We are told that the objection at this time was whether or not we're stationary, geocentric, and all the stars are moving around us, or the new hotness of heliocentrism, with elliptical motions and us flying at thousands of miles an hour around the sun, by way of a model without necessarily giving distances, just scale, for Earth as a sphere moving around the sun. That's the current story. That means that you can control what happens in the future. Where are we going in the future? Mars? Yeah, he who controls the past controls the present, and therefore controls the future. If you believe that to be sustaining life, you need to bugger off into the sky, that's because you are under the control system that has started its origins. Yeah, like X-Men and Wolverine, when they show you where he came from. That's all we're doing. It doesn't matter that the story of Wolverine may have plot holes and flaws. It's irrelevant. All that's relevant is where we are today, therefore where we're going to be in 20 years' time. Are we all going to be jumping onto a rocket ship going to the moon? Definitely not. But people think they are, don't they? And that's what we're really discussing here. Sure, you've all got
King
to
Arthur,
say. Go ahead,
Nathan,
Adam.
Well,
is a good example. How you can change a whole nation. So, Neil, where's King Arthur from?
England.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? Except, of course, he doesn't exist prior to Geoffrey of Monmouth writing about him. And lots of historians at the time asking, where's this history from? He doesn't exist in English history until he's invented. Now, it's not a total invention. Yeah. So he's then put in and written in. Why? To create a nation of the English to unify behind a great majestical court that used to exist that set standards. And that's what unifies British Knights going forward, that story, that tale. But it does not exist prior to the 9th century. And it's a construct of the state to unify the state. Now, it adopts other stories and things to wipe out history as well and restructure history, so the existing history becomes our own as well. But that's a good example of something you would assume, but if you look into it, you can see it's just constructed history and fundamentally adopted history.
That's
I don't
mythology.
think that's fine.
That's technically
Yes, Arwin.
mythology.
Yeah, but
Hold on. Go ahead, Arwin. Go ahead, Arwin.
That's technically everything you described is summarized in one word: mythology.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what that is. And mythology writes our hearts and minds. When we get the thought about mythology, it's very inspiring because that's the purpose of it.
It's also the title. What's the system called? Heliocentric.
And mythology is
But,
probably a good word for this nonsense because, like, this is why I'm okay with saying I don't know if history that we've been told is okay, because how many times have we heard, oh, we've known for thousands of years that it's a globe and everyone's known, and the Greeks 2,000 years ago, blah blah blah. Okay, but then you'll have things that happen, like, I don't know, newspapers 100 years ago saying that people were getting arrested for teaching the globe. You got a lady that's still alive that said she was being taught flat earth when she was a kid. Like, things like that happen. It's like, do I really keep going with the history that I've been told, or is it actually just that, his story? I don't
Brian.
know.
Hold on. Brian's been trying to get a word in for ages. Go ahead.
Yeah, just something contradictory to do with Kepler and his analemma. Now, I stated earlier that Kepler learned astronomy through astrology. But Kepler was renowned for his astrological charts after his analemma times. Kepler was renowned for, like, people used to pay a lot of money for him to do birth charts, what's known as an astrological birth chart. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that we know astrology is purely based on cycles. Cycles, just like they use it. And it's part of the astrological system of cycles. Parts of that are used for celestial navigation, for whatever amount of stars, the 64 stars, whatever that is, can be used for celestial navigation. Those 64 stars are based on cycles, and they can give you 50,000 years into the future. Those predictions, or not predictions, those cycles, right? They'll never change, right? Tent Man will attest to this. He spoke with the correct people and got that information. So the point I'm making is this: there's a girl. I'm feeding back on someone there. There's a girl online. I can't remember. I think her name is Sadie or something. And I listened to her years ago before I got into Flat Earth. And she was an astrologer, and she's in her 60s or early 70s. So she was an astrologer since she was in her 20s or something, if I remember correctly. So she was decades and decades and decades at astrology. When she came across Flat Earth back in probably 2015, 16 time, she changed from a glober to a flat earther immediately. She said that treating the Earth not just as a globe, but a stationary globe, but as a flat plane that's completely separate to the reference frame above us, and doing astrology that way is far more correct. It's far more precise. She said everything is better. So why would Kepler, just going back on what we were talking about with Kepler, why would Kepler, having this knowledge of astrology and how to do astrology, why would he suddenly go along with this Copernican model and have us on a rotating globe that's also orbiting a central sun, blah, blah, blah? It doesn't make logical sense if he existed and was an astrologer that he would do that, as it's anti-astrology, because it makes astrology more difficult to do it that way.
I wanted to mention
like
something real
this.
quick. I just wanted to mention something real quick. What
Yeah.
we was talking about with the Catholic Church, the Spanish Inquisition, the doctrine of discovery, unum sanctum, all those policies that were done back by the Bishopra and the Papal Bulls and all that. There's a term for the reason why we have these books that popped up out of nowhere, or these books that can't be found, or these names of these people. There's a term in Latin called indexum prohibitorium, indexum librorum prohibitorium, and then there's indexum liberatorium expurgatorium, which is basically the burning of the books, where it happened, Alexandria and all of that. But a lot of these books, a lot of the history of the ancients were destroyed during the conquest of the crusade of the Catholicism and the Catholic Church just sweeping across the earth and just wiping out, taking over things. So a lot of times that switch, that reset, that new paradigm switch you're talking about, that could be a lot to do which how this heliocentric thing came about and took over what is said to be known as the ancients knew, according to their symbols and their hieroglyphics or whatever you want to call it, the writings on the walls, yada yada, they are pro flat earth, they're pro earth flame, they're pro firmament, all of these things that are all in sync, from the Veda to the Septuagint, the Waspi, from the Torah, Tanakh, the Bible, King James, all that. They're all unified, saying the same thing. But this heliocentric thing came out of nowhere, and I think it has to do, like what Nathan was saying, the whole connection from long time ago, during this whole reset, when it was just conquest of the church, the taking over and pushing this new agenda and this new propaganda. And it just slowly, we don't know the time exactly, but we definitely know that a lot of this stuff started happening from the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. And that's why you have that Catholic priest in black and white film doing what he was doing, on that video that we all saw before. But that's what happened with the reset, burning of the books and put up some new books to say this is the new agenda. This is what it is. This is the propaganda.
Good segue for me to shout out the over 100 people watching. So we may actually extend today's live show. So I've spent several days now stress testing the computer synthetically, which is nothing like doing it for real. So I'm going to extend today's live show. So please smash the share button. I'm going to give today's show the title, Why Do People Think They Live on a Sphere? Because this has been a really good exploratory discussion of exactly that. So I'm going to give it that title. And hopefully we continue the discussion beyond the hour mark. But in case we do have a catastrophic failure of the computer, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a member, and all that good stuff. Obviously, a massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show that will continue possible. But should there be a failure, I just want to thank everyone before, just in case this is the point that everything goes wrong. But as I say, we will continue to be live, but just to get everyone in the mood of an after show vibe. That's me rounding out. There won't be an outro. So yeah, we'll have an extended live show, guys.
I want to say we're dancing a lot in the unknown, especially like throwing out all of history is. I don't know if I'm prepared to do that.
It doesn't matter either way. Did you not, Adam? Can you reiterate your point? Because it doesn't matter either way. They may have existed. It doesn't matter.
The way, what matters much more is how it is presented. That is what really matters. How it is presented tells you why they rolled it out, to what end. Yes, how would that influence people reading about it? Like mythology influences those that read about it.
It's a bugger that you had a good point, because you were interrupting Adam. I was hoping he'd lead off. But yes, good point, Adam. Also, shout out to Rinsler. Woo-hoo-hoo! $50. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Really appreciate the support.
I'm not Adam.
I know you're not Adam. Shout out super chat.
That was the point of the sarcasm.
It was still a good point. It was a worthy interruption, is what I was trying to get at. But nevertheless, irritating for Adam. But I'm going to shout out Rinsler, which will also be irritating. But Adam, good for me. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate the support. People keep asking why or how Truman Show. People accept the world as it is presented. Yeah, exactly.
Because they were told to. They were called
exactly. Because that's right? The world that you are experiencing. You know, it's suspension of disbelief when it comes to the globe, because you accept that you are in that world when you see Superman flying around it, or you see spacemen flying around it.
But it starts with you have to learn things from your parents. So you go by what your parents tell you. That's how it all starts up. And they basically hijack that necessary mechanism for people to grow up.
Okay.
They hijack it and then force you to retain that trust in them as a priesthood forever.
Yeah, we got it. Thank you. Just one sec. Neil and Arwin, just one sec. Yes, further to John's point in regards to he's not willing to take it as far as to say I reject various aspects of history that may have primary source evidence to back it, or even evidence that goes back 200 or 300 years to back it. Either way, I want Adam to reiterate his point, because not to make his point moot, that's, you know, perfectly acceptable. Fine, I acknowledge your point, John. But Adam, go ahead.
I'd probably just draw it back to the 1984. Quite really. All we know for certain, whether you want to boo-hoo history, question it, rewrite it yourself, all you know is the story you're given right now as to why we get there. That is sufficient for me, and especially when I look at it and the way it's constructed and what it's constructed to give me. I love these fantastical tales, and the more you look at them, like I say, the more you analyze how this thing came about in the times it came about, the more fantastical it becomes. And just use that as a caution. Yeah. What's its purpose? These
exactly.
tales?
Analyze the
You
motivation.
live on a ball.
Exactly. Analyze the motivation of the story. Why is the story being disseminated to me? Not what's the origin story or the validation of the story or the validation of the characters in the story. Why am I being told this story? What's the purpose of me being told this story?
But hold on a second. Hold on. How do you validate history?
How do you
You
what?
can't.
Well, you do primary source research. It's a different standard of evidence, but that's not what we're discussing today. Shout out to Theo Megaworthy, who says, how many curvilinear radii do historical doctors have? I assume that's a joke. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate the support.
And by the way, you accept the world that you live in because I learned it in school and my parents learned it in school. That's what they gave us. That's what they taught us. We didn't just come up with it ourselves.
You have to tell the lie often. You have to make it big, make it often. Some Nazi propaganda technique. Completely overwhelm the subject with the information. Have globes everywhere, space everywhere.
Well, you hit it right in the head because that's what they do. They have globes everywhere, space everywhere.
Just to add to the history bit, I'm not necessarily poo-pooing all the Kappa stuff, but if you put it into context, and we spoke earlier, somebody mentioned about, well, I was taught flat Earth as a young child, some old woman, and all these anecdotal things that, from a history point of view, are just as valid as Kepler. The history we're given today is, I would suggest, is different using Kepler. We're told that at this point now, it was the progression, the realization of the ancient knowledge that it was retarded, that it was a flat Earth. And by Kepler's time, we already kind of knew it was a ball. Yet we've got this contradictory personal statements from people saying, no, no, it was still taught to me as a child. The history we're given today, I would suggest, regarding Kepler, may be different and used differently to how it was used to that child that was taught flat Earth at school in the late early 1900s. It's how they it goes to 84. They control it. So how they use those documents, it'll be written to you that in 200 years' time, when it's accepted as flat, that these people were heretics, and they could rewrite the history that they were heretics and they were held for that. The documents just describe what they think.
Theo Megaworthy, sorry to interrupt. Theo Megaworthy via the super chat, just clarifying that when he said documents, docs, that's what he was talking about. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Thanks for the super chat.
No,
Theo
that was
Megaworthy.
that was it.
Sorry, Adam.
No, that's it. I'm just saying we're given the intonation of the history. You look at history now, people will have varying different opinions on the same document and what it means. Yeah, we've been documents that are contradictory to the current rhetoric. History is terrible for that. Yeah. So
I'm gonna have to get brutal.
We're fed his story, and the point I'm making is his story is is relative to the current narrative. It's important to demonstrate that people realised how retarded flat Earth was hundreds of years ago, even though we've got evidence to the contrary. But that maybe wasn't what people were taught 150 years ago, even though today we're taught they were.
All right, we are fed, right, that a certain connotation to it. So who are they? Who are these people?
Whoever we assume to be
David
disseminating
and
the
Linda
information.
History.
Yeah.
Who are they?
Oh, I don't know them personally. But when we use that term,
just
we're
name
talking
them.
about the construct, aren't we? The construct that's given, the construct that's being given now in terms of flat Earth history and the development of the globe. That's in the kind of textbooks as what's been agreed. How did it get there? How did we develop? Well, we've got that history of Kepler, haven't we? And on all these bits we've been discussing, that's the history we've got now.
That's out to original D Rose. It says Index Libronium Prohibitorum, aka Censorship Index. I can't read this. This is just what it's in Latin, presumably.
Forum Prohibitorum,
aka burning the books. Thank you for the super chat, D Rose.
Right. So we're being fed. That's who's feeding us. We're putting up this ambiguous idea of these devious people tapping their fingers together. I don't like where this is going. I'm sorry. I'm not going to agree.
It's the hidden hand.
Okay,
John,
let me ask a
just
question.
buy into our conspiratard nonsense for a bit. It's fun. The hidden hand, for God's
technically,
sake.
that's
The
what
hidden
they did.
hand.
Let me ask John a
whose
question.
hand?
John, now I'm not on either side of the fence here, right? Because I just take their planes and I debunk them. That's all I ever do, right? But Nathan said something earlier, I've heard said many times, that the Nazis supposedly, and I heard it as Hitler supposedly said, to make a lie big and keep saying it, right? Have you any evidence that that was from them?
Did I make a claim that it was?
I'm not asking you for, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm trying to make a point. The point I'm making is, hang on. The point I'm making is, I could restate that exact thing that Nathan stated, and 100 other people could restate that in a week. But I have never seen any evidence that it actually came from them, from the source they're claiming it came from.
Goebbels.
I haven't seen evidence of that. Yeah, but where's the evidence of it?
On propaganda
Well,
sheets.
why are you directing this at me? I'm not making a claim about any of it. I don't get it.
The point I'm making is we just pre-assume stuff and go along with it. Now, I don't know whether that did or didn't come from the Nazis. I don't know if it did or didn't. I know I'm told it did, and I just pre-assume it did, and I state it as if it did. But it may be, this pre-assumption of stuff is the problem. Not,
Well,
not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's fed to us, right? That this is what was said, right? So we take it as law.
Is Brian trying to make my point, which is to say that it makes no difference if Goebbels even existed in this example? Because the point about making the lie big, it is a big lie. Telling it often, it is told often. And people buying it, they definitely do, is still completely valid regardless of my source. The source material or its validation doesn't invalidate the point I made. Maybe that's the point you're making, or maybe you're disagreeing with that point. In which case, fine, just tell me so we understand where this conversation is going.
The statement is a statement of fact, but maybe like the lie is that it is the source it came from. Maybe that's part of this. Maybe that's part of the joke. Is that the source they say it came from? It didn't come from at all. That's only a big lie.
Right. Okay.
That everyone keeps repeating, so believing. No, maybe it did come from them, but it doesn't change the validity of the statement. Just 1 second, Adam. It doesn't change the validity of the statement. The point is we pre-assume straight away because of the history we are given. But I know that there's kids being taught history now in school that is different from what I was taught 3-4 decades ago.
Well, think about that. Hold on, think about that. Look what they're teaching now about 9/11. They'll tell you that hijackers came in, overthrew planes, and crashed them into buildings. Is that true?
Doesn't matter whether it's true, does it? It doesn't matter at all. The point I maybe try and reiterate. What I'm making is what is it trying to make you think? What does it do for society? Well, as I said with King Arthur, there you can see what it does there. Yeah, you can see what Kepler's doing. You can see 9/11. What did that do? That justified attacking a different Arabian country. It was put there, whether it's true, false, or whatever. What the government did with that history, was use it to motivate a will to attack another country, separate country. Yeah,
I agree.
How they used it. So the truth of 9/11 is kind of irrelevant to what the government do.
Did you all pay attention to what Adam just says?
But what I'm trying to say is that that's being taught.
Yeah.
It's being taught today is history.
What Adam's trying to get at is it doesn't necessarily matter if the event happens, right? Because in terms of the suspension of disbelief, which is all it would be at that point, it's still having the same effect. It's like a placebo. You're saying, well, if the event didn't happen, did people not get behind the purpose of the event and what it was used to motivate people to do, or did they just do it anyway? Therefore, it makes no difference if the event happened, because the event was successful if it's only being used to make people do a certain thing. Now, in the case of the globe, we are being controlled. It's no different when it comes to the globe. So therefore, does it matter whether or not the stories of Kepler are true, or if Kepler even existed? No, it doesn't. Do people get told the stories so that they appreciate that they're on a spinning ball flying through a space vacuum? Yeah, they do.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, hold on one second. The fact of the matter is that's being taught in school today as history. So how do I know what I was taught in school as history happened the way it happened?
You don't. But hold on a sec. Hold on. The thing is, the quote that Brian gave about the big lie was not from Joseph Goebbels. You can find it in Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. Now, do I know the guy, Adolf Hitler, that wrote the book, so I can say for sure that Adolf Hitler said that? No, I don't know that. We're talking about a different standard of evidence, though, right?
Yeah, but what was the context he used it in that book?
He was talking about the Jews. He was talking about the Jews.
So he wasn't making it as a statement that people should do it.
No, he wasn't talking about his regime. He was using it as an attack on the Jewish people. It is not a Goebbels quote. That's been misconstrued. I don't know who brought that up.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is now with a bit of context, it doesn't come from, it's not like the statement of the Nazis said that you should make a big lie and keep saying it to make the lie happen. That is, with context, not true, is it? The context of it is that he was referring to the Jewish people at the time and things to do with them. He wasn't making it, he wasn't telling people that they should make a big lie and keep saying it. So there you go. So straight away, people, when they people regurgitate that, and they call it a quote, and they don't put any context around it. No, I'm not trying to defend Hitler. The point I'm making is the way people regurgitate that and the way it's portrayed is not correct historically, is it?
Yes, it is. You all just got it wrong.
Well, how did we get it wrong?
Oh, God, this is going to segue away from the actual point now, isn't it, John? Just be careful.
No, you all said Goebbels said it, and he did not.
I didn't say Goebbels.
I did. I got it wrong. Okay, I acknowledge it.
Yeah,
Will that stop us going on this segue?
Who cares who said it?
I got it wrong.
Who cares who said it?
I got it wrong. I'm just going to acknowledge that to hopefully stop the conversation from veering off onto this, whether or not I'm right about.
No, but this is good, Nathan. This is good because you said Goebbels said it. I said you originally said the Nazis. I said I heard it was Hitler. You said Goebbels. So I could have just not known any better and gone along with you, and then I'm telling someone else some other time that Joseph Goebbels said blah 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 when he didn't say it, and even the context that Hitler said it in. The context. Just 1 second. The context.
Hold on, guys. Let Brian go.
Just 1 second. Yeah. The context at which Hitler even used it was not to tell people to tell big lies and keep telling them. That wasn't the context. He was referring to something else. So my point is that straight away we've taken something that we all presumed was historical fact. We didn't even know the correct source or the context, and we just went along with it. And that's not the Nazis only several decades ago, really. So how easily can history be completely misconstrued and manipulated?
But how quickly did I correct it by just looking it up?
I'm not sure of the point.
That's not the
Just it's
That's the
misquote.
primary.
That's all it is. It's still attributed to the same group of people. And
No,
the point of all of this is, forget the quote. What did these lies allow the state to get the people to do, if we're referring to Nazi Germany? How did this misconstruement of history that they presented, particularly with regards to the Jewish people and the history of the German people, their Aryan ancestry and the primacy that supposedly gave them, what did that motivate and allow them to do to the people? What mindset did that put the people in to allow them to be controlled? That would be the bigger
Hold on a
thing to
second.
look at, irrespective of who said what exactly. What were they saying it for?
right. But my point is if you go to the primary source of evidence, you don't get confused or tricked by those things. Then you know what that person is cited as saying. But just accepting what someone else says as quoted history is the problem that we're facing.
Yeah, but the problem is also what you just said, because there's no context given with that quote. It's spun in such a way that people are under the impression that Adolf Hitler, with his book, was telling people, you should make these big lies and keep telling them to fool everyone. Whereas that wasn't the context it was used in. So the context of it is being manipulated. And you're saying primary source evidence. Well, I can go to the primary source evidence for Kepler. That doesn't make the Earth a globe that goes around the sun.
Hold on. No, but if you went to the primary source evidence, you would know the context of what it was being said in. That's my point. So you wouldn't be fooled if you did that. But people don't. So they're fooled.
Point taken.
That's why I had said, that's why I put up the thing, indexum librorum prohibitorum. That's basically CNN and all these mainstream media basically putting out a narrative, while those who do know the primary source of the facts are censored. The ones that did do the research that went against the narrative, they're being censored. That's the prohibitorium. Then you have the index librorum expurgatorium. That's where they destroy the person or the person's contents that's going up against the mainstream narrative, whether it be back in the days of the pharaohs and the popes, or whether it goes to now with these Peters, these so-called presidents. What they say goes. Anybody that goes against it is vilified, scrutinized, demonized, and considered an outcast or either executed, one or the other. But it's going to be some type of expurgatorius that's going to happen.
Well, history is always written by the victors. So if the victors decide not to be honest, which is most likely they won't, the history you get is what they decide to give it.
Facts.
Well, I think it's the ideological problem right there, because history is written by the winning ideology. They're the ones that control history, is the ideology, not necessarily some dude that's tapping his fingers together. It's the way in which they perceive the world, the people that give you the history. So I think that's what the problem is their ideology is corrupted.
I heard mention earlier of a heliocentric model, I think. Can someone send me a link, please? 'Cause I've never seen it.
I've just had to look up this Goebbels Hitler thing. The big
I
lie.
posted it in Master D, Adam. A couple of quotes.
I was just reading. I've gone from the Jewish Virtual Library just to see. So it's taken from Mein Kampf. It's difficult to attribute that a specific quote to Goebbels, but he does reference it in a letter to the English, accusing the English of it, which is interesting. He says the English follow the principle that when one lies, one should lie big and stick to it. So he is quoted of using it. So it appears to be a quote that's around, used by both sides.
Quick shout out to Theo Megawati. He says, how about someone read from the primary source document? Yeah, it makes sense, especially as we're preaching it, Theo. Thank you for the super chat.
I've got the quote from Mein Kampf.
One second. Brian's point is misplaced, was the other super chat from Theo Megawati. Thank you very much for the super chats. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I'll read the full quote if you wish. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and/or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent from the truth of the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus, by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. And with that, I just reiterate, why is the state lying? It tells you there. The lie is kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter even if it's true. Look at what the state is doing it for. Yeah. And what it has to do to maintain the lie, to maintain control. That's what it's telling you. Forget what the lie is. Yeah. Recognize it's a lie and what's its political purpose. What does it allow the state to do to the populace? Or get the
right
to do.
But that's just confusing a paraphrase of that quotation with a letter that was sent to the English with a paraphrase that cites that source.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the same thing.
Like I say, I feel you're focusing on trying to attribute this as opposed to dealing with what the phrase actually means, which is, I think, more relevant in the conversation we've been having.
Absolutely. We went off the rails. I'm glad we got to the conclusion, but ultimately that is exactly right, Adam. We're talking about how is the information being used, not the validity of the sources.
Right, but even in that, right, if you want to hold on to the idea that he who controls the present controls the past, and he who controls the past controls the future, then wars, real wars, where control can be lost or gained, don't exist in your paradigm. They can't, because control's already been had.
Sorry. What's the problem with that? In terms of what might or might not have happened, history is controlled by the victors. Would you not agree? Same thing applies. He who controls the present controls the past. He who controls the past controls the future. That's the correct. We both got it wrong initially, but that's the correct way around.
Yes, right. But so how did these people ever get control to wage war against those?
Who are these people? The hidden hand?
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. There isn't these people.
Yeah, that appeals to some. It's. Well, I don't think it's a quote I would stake my life on.
Well, is there two sides? No. In reality, there isn't two sides. There's the appearance that's given to the public of two sides all the time in wars and other things. There isn't. There's not two sides. There's one side. Or sorry, there can't be one side, but there's just one power, whoever they are, and they have been controlling things and manipulating basically the ignorant, which is us, for a long time. Why they do it? Why they do it? I don't know, but they have been doing it.
Everyone, too many people. Hold on 1 second. Shout out to Theo Megawati, who says, Nathan, that is on point with your conclusion about the pervasive heliocentric lie being forced into the light of the quantum mechanics era. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate the support.
But just doesn't that make you feel hopeless? Can't we just maybe assume that they're stupid or wrong, or they're just wrong?
What if they didn't even exist? How can we do that if they maybe didn't exist and we explore the other side of the coin?
What makes me want to do is control the present so we can control the future. Let's take over.
See, Neil, that's great, but you're not in control of the present, so you'll never control the past to control the future. Kind of a hopeless idea.
Why can't we gain control?
Because you don't control the present to control the past to control the future.
Well, we can control the present, and we're making a difference now by changing the paradigm.
Hold on. Neil has got a point, right? We are directly influencing it. We are part of the cog. We are a cog. how can I phrase this? We are a cog in the machine right now, aren't we? So when you say no, you can't control the present, isn't that strictly what we're trying to do? Maybe it's futile. I'm not going to, argue the quantitative value of how much we're influencing it, but qualitatively we are. That's what we're doing. We're going to tangent off on that potentially now before I shout out Rinsler again for the super chat. Thank you for the support, Rinsler. I really appreciate it. Statistics. The prime enemy of the state is religion or God. People must believe entirely in the state at all costs. This is in line with your current conversation. Thank you for the super chat, Rinsler. I don't know why everyone keeps pointing out that their super chats are in line with the current conversation, but thank you for the super chat. One more. Shout out to Theo Megaworty. It says, Brian, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, A2-sided 1. Okay, I didn't fully understand that, but yeah, thank you for the super chats. Go ahead, Neil.
Nathan, it started out as a small little section of the internet. It's not that any longer. So you can't tell me that we're not making a difference and we're trying to get control of the present narrative.
So
influence is not the same as being in control. It's influencing. That's not the one that's actually determining what is official.
Yeah, but we start out.
Yeah, but you're assuming we're going to get there. You don't know that. It doesn't seem likely. Just because we are hitting true points doesn't mean that we get to gain the control.
Hello, Owen and Neil. Yeah, let's not argue about the quantitative difference that we may or may not be making. I thought I drew a line through that before you could argue about it. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was going to say what Neil's expressing is the idea that we have we can drive ourselves to do these things. But the statement that he's attaching it to says that you are driven. So he who controls the past wants you to do this in the future, if you're wanting to hold to that statement.
Maybe. It's not by accident.
That's where you get the
flat
control.
Earth is here, is it, right? We all say this has been given to us, right?
They can't delete it. They'd have to delete heliocentrism.
Yeah, but if we work off that quote, then it's all pointless, because if we didn't control the past, then how can we control the future? Unless we did control the past.
That's deep, Brian.
Indeed. But with that, I'm going to say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, if you are watching this extended live show, this is where we bid you farewell. So another massive thank you to all of you. Smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a member, and all that good stuff. Looks like there is actually another super chat that just came in from Theo Megaworty, so I'll just do a quick shout out to him before we fully round out this live show. So big shout out to Theo Megaworty. Nathan, purposefully misunderstanding my posts, so I'll buy more. Lol. Good business is good business. Lol. Superpositions is what I mean. Lol. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Really appreciate it. But once again, I'll say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Another massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!